Hello and welcome to the midweek edition of Business Life with me, Emma Davis. Coming up, World Bank set to approve two separate funding supports for Ghana, totaling $400 million targeted at the 2024 budget and Ghana Financial Stability Fund, as the bank promises to support the country's development.
In practice, this operation supports that will, aim to restore macro stability in the short term and lay the foundation for sustainable and resilient growth in the medium term.
Average unemployment rate in Ghana for the first 3 quarters of 2023 was 14.7%.
From the second quarter of 2022 to the third quarter of 2023, we've seen a steady increase in our absorption rate, specifically by 5.6 percentage points.
Later on the Joy Business Van, we'll tell you how entrepreneur Jacinta Amatamoklo's innovative packaging business is creating a buzz around her startup. These and many more in the next 30 minutes. Please stay. Welcome. Let's settle for the details. The World Bank is set to approve two separate funds for Ghana. The first is a $150 million fund, which will be approved before the end of this first quarter and targeted at programs in the budget. Secondly, the bank will approve about $250 million by the end of June for the Ghana Financial Stability Fund. Senior economist at the World Bank Group, David L. Malay, tells Joy Business his outfit is committed to supporting Ghana's economic recovery.
I think it's important to explain the overall aim of this operation, these funds. The loan is in support of the government's efforts to implement key reforms, and those reforms especially that align with the World Bank mission and vision of a world free of poverty on a livable planet. In practice, this operation supports efforts that will, aim to restore macro stability in the short term and lay the foundation for sustainable and resilient growth in the medium term. Some examples include strengthening domestic revenue mobilization and address the root cause of the crisis and reduce the fiscal deficit, actions to help safeguard the financial sector stability, to ensure that the banking sector and the rest of the financial sector remain stable, actions to improve the investment climate, actions to put the energy sector back on a sure financial and operational footing to ensure that the losses that anchored by the sectors get contained and reduced over time. There are also actions to strengthen social protection architecture, and finally, action to strengthen climate adaptation and mitigation.
What mechanisms have you put in place to ensure that these funds are well utilized? Or if I say that I'm going to support the budget programs or to support the recovery of the economy, what mechanisms have you put in place to ensure that they are utilized for what the board approved for?
Thank you. So this operation supports, consistent, as I said, it supports a consistent program of reforms, and the disbursement of the funds is based on the effective implementation of these reforms. So these priority areas that I've mentioned before, there is a list of specific reforms that have already been implemented, before these funds get disbursed. In addition, the World Bank ensures that the overall macro fiscal framework is adequate, basically meaning that the budget, and the debts are sustainable or are on a path to sustainability. And finally, we monitor these macro and fiscal policies closely, directly with the government and jointly with the IMF.
In a related development, Parliament is set to approve $300 million to be provided by the World Bank Board to support some projects in the 2024 budget. The facility was approved last month. However, disbursement has been delayed due to delays in Parliament. And I have with me my colleague George Riafe to help us with more details on this. George, why is there a delay? Can you give us a total picture?
This is not a grant, and unlike the IMF facility, we understand that this is a concessionary loan. So what the bank is insisting now on that they need a cabinet approval, they need a parliamentary approval for this. So this was actually approved by the board last month, but unlike the IMF that the thing came immediately, it appears that we have not been able to do all these things. So the World Bank is saying that get cabinet approval, get parliament approval, and then the disbursement will be done immediately. It appears that there were some challenges, but what we can report now is that the Finance Committee of Parliament has approved this, and they forwarded it to the House for consideration. Another interesting information coming through is that this loan agreement was scheduled on the other paper that was yesterday. And so it is likely that if it doesn't happen today, it could happen on Thursday, or it could also happen on Friday. What we understand is that as soon as Parliament approves this facility, the World Bank Board will do the necessary transfers to Government of Ghana's account at the Bank of Ghana.
But do you know why Parliament is delaying on this?
Well, I think that it has to do with getting through the process. There have been a lot of things on their table. They went on research, they went on break, and they are now coming in. And maybe they want to look at the other things as well, which is more important to them before they look at this thing. So that could be the reason. And also don't forget that it has to get a cabinet approval. So that also delayed a little bit. But now we understand that for the 300 million facility, it's been passed by the Finance Committee and is going to go before the House. Now, Emma, one quick thing we need to understand was that this is part of the IMF program support. The IMF is coming on board. The World Bank is also coming on board. Now, this facility should have come in somewhere last year, November. But because Ghana delayed in getting this bilateral deal, it is now coming through. In the first quarter of this year, there's an additional $150 million that's also supposed to be coming. And we understand that that is also being scheduled for consideration by the House. So we're looking at somewhere more than $400 million coming through from the World Bank before the end of this quarter, or leave holding all these things constant and thinking that all other things being equal, the House will pass the thing this week. It means by the end of this month, Government of Ghana's account at the Bank of Ghana should receive more than $400 million coming from the World Bank.
This month?
Yeah.
Is that confirmed?
Well, no, I'm just saying that if you're able to get Parliament approved, and from what we have picked up from the World Bank, these things doesn't delay that much. As soon as these agreements are secured, the necessary transfers could be done within 2 days or 3 days.
What would this, what would be the impact on the economy?
Well, Emma, you know that there are a lot of projects out there that have stalled. Now, when you see these projects saying that maybe a country like Germany say that we are helping Ghana construct a road, there's another bit of it where they call the counterpart funding that the government of Ghana is supposed to provide support for. Some of these loans coming from the World Bank are supposed to help the government of Ghana provide what they call the counterpart funding. And therefore, because government was not able to provide this, there have been delays in these projects resuming and all the rest. What this will mean is that some of these projects that have stalled over the years, and because of this challenge in funding and all the rest, government can now provide that counterpart funding to these projects. There are other World Bank funded projects or initiatives that this money was supposed to support. And it means that it has stalled over the years, and you could see some resumption in the coming months. Also, don't forget that when the money is coming, they're going to go to Bank of Ghana. And those FX dollars go to the reserves of the Bank of Ghana. And the Bank of Ghana will then give the CD equivalent to the Ministry of Finance. When these monies come in, they will boost the Bank of Ghana's reserves. It will put it in a strong position to support the Ghanaians at a time when the cedi is going under some pressure, they are struggling to support the currency. This might go a long way to improve our reserve position for the Bank of Ghana to support the local currency.
Thank you, George. George Riafe is an editor with Joy Business, and let's further analyze this. And joining me is partner at Deloitte, Yalati. Yalati, thank you very much for joining us. What do you make of these World Bank inflows and impact on the economy?
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity. I think, as George rightly discussed, it's an opportunity to support our reserves. That's a critical factor, particularly if we looking to manage our exchange rate. It's been fairly stable over the last couple of years. If you look at how it depreciated a few years ago. And so some of these inflows are helpful in helping us get some reserves in terms of foreign currency or hard currency. And I think overall, it helps and supports our program objectives under the IMF program. So our key program objectives are one, or some of them are restoring debt sustainability. And so what we've done, or what we used to do, is that on quarterly basis or every now and then we used to go to the international capital market and we were borrowing at commercial rate. Now with this facility, whether they are coming in the form of grants or concessionary loans, they are relatively cheaper than the commercial facilities that we used to borrow from the international capital market. So this is a good opportunity for us to manage our debt, restore debt sustainability. Mind you, the year 2023, government borrowed approximately 50 billion Ghana cedis from the local market. That's about 69%, or almost 70% of government financing is from the local market. That has the effect of crowding out loanable funds to business. So if we have some of these support coming in foreign currency, supporting our budget, it helps. And if you listen to the IMF team, what they said was that some of this money are not just coming to support our budget, but they are dedicated towards supporting specific programs, which is a good thing. Because when you do go to the international market to borrow, there is no direction as to where you put the money. But this has specific budgetary support with specific program objectives. So you are putting in specific sectors that will help you increase productivity, help you restore economic stability. So I think this is good news for us, and we should embrace it. What I'm worried about is the delay, particularly in getting parliamentary approval for the concessionary loan facility. Concessionary loan is better than the commercial facility, as I said. And so if you can accelerate the process of getting the approval from cabinet and then parliament, it will help.
Can we say that Ghana's donors are now reacting to the IMF program? In your view, is it negative or positive?
It was expected, and I think a lot of the donor communities that we spoke to or we interacted prior to us signing on the IMF program were clear that an IMF program alone cannot take us out of the economic challenges that we had at the time. So just signing onto an IMF program and getting $3 billion was not sufficient to take us out of the economic challenges that we were going through. And so once you sign on onto the IMF program, you restore economic stability, you ensure fiscal discipline. And when you ensure economic stability and work towards fiscal discipline, you get donor support, because the donor community come on board to help you support specific programs. So my advice to government is that this is the time for us to revisit some of our flagship programs, repackage them, and get donor funding to support these programs. We have some very good programs like Infrastructure for Poverty Alleviation or Poverty Eradication Projects, the IPEP program. We had Planting for Food and Jobs. We had Obatampa Cares program. We've gone silent on this program. We are not emphasizing them as we used to. But we have to restructure some of these programs and repackage them and sell them to the donor community. Because now you have loanable funds, you have grants that are available to support the IMF program and to support government budgets. So what government should do now is to now repackage some of the programs, particularly programs that are aimed at supporting the poor and the vulnerable. And the new Minister of Finance mentioned, I read somewhere, that he's committed to programs that are supporting the poor and the vulnerable society. So we should be able to repackage some of our programs that will support the poor and the vulnerable society.
Okay, yeah, let's move away from this issue and talk about President Akufo-Addo's proposal that Ghana withdraws at least 30% of all public funds and other assets kept in foreign banks and financial institutions. Let's first listen to him.
Take a decision that a minimum of 30% of the reserves of each one of us, sovereign reserves, should in fact be invested in the African multilateral institutions. I speak about the ADB, I speak of Afro-Exim Bank, which would strengthen their balance sheets and strengthen their capacity also to facilitate more and more resources for our development. So these institutions are institutions which are ours and which we can trust.
Thoughts? Is this feasible?
Well, I think I will look at it in a broader context. There are some statistics that I recently came across when I attended a mining event recently in Africa. And you realize that it is not just about the reserves that governments or African governments are keeping outside the continent, but even the funds that we need to invest in strategic sectors. I'll give you a very good example. So Africa has 1/5 of the world's population. So about 20% of the world's population is in Africa. Africa has 30% of the world resources, natural resources, 30%. But what is interesting is that Africa only gives 2% of the resources or the capital that's required to invest in these resources. So what it means is that Africa is a ground for exploitation rather than a ground for investment. So all the exploitation that's happening in Africa, the monies are taken out, and only a portion, that's about 2% or less than 5%, that are kept on the continent. So it means that it's not only reserves, but even in other sectors of the economy, money that are needed for investment, for expansion, for job creation, are all kept outside the continent. So I think it's a very good idea. What we need to do is, in Africa, we do not have a united front. So some of these proposals, you only speak to them, but if you don't have a united front, if you look at the Francophone African countries, a lot of them keep their reserves obviously in France. And so when you ask them or when you go to the table to speak to them, the question is, are they also willing to follow through, come to terms with us in the Anglophone, Lusophone, and other continents or other colleagues within the continent to come with the same principle, work towards the same objectives? Because we have divergent objectives and some of them do not help. So I think it's a very good idea. It's going to help us if we're going to keep a lot of the reserves on the continent. But the problem is we are not united, and the African continent is not united in arriving at some of these things. So if we as Africans and the African leaders come to the table, have a common objective that at any point in time, our reserves should be 50% of the money that we export or the money that we need for investment should be kept on the continent, then we'll have the benefit. Otherwise, if somebody chooses to keep only 10%, another person decides to keep 90% in a particular country, then obviously we will not achieve the result that they're looking at.
Thank you very much, Yao, for your time. Yao Latte is partner with Deloitte. You're still watching Business Live with me, Emma Davis. We'll take a quick break. We'll be back for Business Live. I am Emma Davis. For more business news, do log on to myjoyonline.com. Have a good evening.